Hello, welcome to Technical Founders. My name is Carlos Lara, software engineer and entrepreneur, and in this video we'll be examining C# arrays and loops with Xamarin.Forms. In the previous video we examined conditional statements with if-else here upon a button clicked. So we have our applications here, and for example you clicked a button. Whenever you clicked, the label would change, so it says button clicked and it shows the current text in the label, hello universe from Technical Founders. You hit OK, and then it changes the label to the other label that we had defined here, which was we are learning mobile development. So we have our button here that we created in the constructor method for the page, and then on the button clicked event, because we examined events in the last video in conditional state, in a very introductory video to conditional statements. So depending on what the text is, it changes it to the other one. So it's if one, do this, and if it's the other text, so else, do the other thing. So you click and you keep flipping back and forth. And last time I only ran it on iOS, but here we have it on Android as well. And if you click, same thing. And by the way, if you click here, it looks different, right? Because again, with Xamarin.Forms, you write the code once and simultaneously you get it for both iOS and Android, and it looks different, right? Because iOS and Android are different. So this would be what we call native iOS, and this is native Android. So you click OK, it flips, and here the same thing. You click OK, and it flips. So if you click again, it flips back to Hello Universe from Technical Founders, and so on. And again, in this video, we'll just do iOS just to keep it simpler, or just to make this video just a little bit shorter. So let's just stop running the current application. And now here we want to do arrays instead of these conditional statements. So we'll go ahead and delete this if-else statement. Now a string is a collection of objects of a certain type, for example, string or integer. And then, so you hold it in a collection, an array, and then you can do things with that arrays, with those objects. And an array is a fixed size. So in C#, the way that you create or declare an array is you say the type of the array. So in this case, we're going to do an array of strings. Strings is like text, right? So just a string of characters. And then before we just said string, for example, name equals Carlos Lara, for example, my name. This is how you declare a string. Now to declare a string array, here you do brackets. You just open a couple of brackets, and it just, in C#, this just means an array of strings. So here we're going to create an array. Let's give it an identifier called names, and then assign a new instance of this array. So we're going to do a new string, and then here, when you're creating the new instance of this array object, we have to define how many objects are going to be, how many string objects are going to be inside of this array. So for example, let's say 3. And arrays, close with a semicolon. Now arrays, the way that they work is they have a set number of elements in them. So once you create it, it has that set. So it has 3 spots. So for example, we'll be able to add 3 objects of type string into this array here. So the way you do that is, so you grab the identifier, names, you do dot. Actually, no, we're not going to use the dot yet. You actually just open up the brackets again, and then you are going to say which index. So right now this is an empty array. So it has 3 spots, but there's nothing in them. They're empty. And the way that arrays work is, I'm going to do a little comment here. They enumerate the elements starting with the index 0. So they use indices, and they start at 0. So for example, this string that has 3 spots, 3 elements, would have the indices 0, 1, and 2. These would be 3 elements, and this is how we reach them. So for example, in the names array of strings, we want to grab the 0 spot, so the very first spot, and here we just want to assign a name, for example. So we are actually going to say Xamarin.Forms, which is what we're using right now to develop. Close it. Now at the 0th index, so at the first spot on the index, we've added this string, and again, strings are always inside quotation marks. And now we have 2 spots left, so let's go ahead and fill those out too. So names, again, now at 1, which is the next spot, let's say Xamarin iOS, which would be if we were doing development just in iOS exclusively. And this is our iOS project right here. This is our Android, and this is our Xamarin.Forms right here. Okay, now for the last one, 2, which would be the 3rd spot, right? 0, 1, 2. We're going to say Xamarin.Android. Close. Okay. So we have our array. We've declared an array of strings and it has 3 elements. Now we want to do something to perform an operation with each element of that array. So for this, we'll use the first kind of loop that we're going to look at in this video, which is called a for each loop. So we say for each, and then we hit tab twice, and Visual Studio here automatically brings up this snippet. So for each, we'll, as a parameter here, we'll grab variable item. So we'll grab a variable. So for example, and you can name it whatever you want. So because we're going to be working with this array of strings called names, we're going to say for each name in names. So for each element name in the array names, we are going to perform an operation here. So what we are going to do here is, we are, like in the previous video, we are going to display an alert. So we are going to say display alert method, open parentheses, and it needs again 3 parameters. So for the title, and it takes a string. So let's just do the actual name, the element that we're grabbing right now. So it's going to grab the first one. So it's going to iterate. This for each loop is going to iterate through this array and grab and do an operation with each one consecutively. So the first iteration through the first loop, it's going to grab this element here. So name would be what's inside there. So name would be Xamarin.Forms in this case. So that would be the first parameter. And then the second parameter here would be a message. So let's just say, I love Xamarin.Forms. So let's just say name. And then for the third parameter, let's just say OK, like the button, just to like get out of that alert box, display alert. Here it's complaining because it wants the await keyword, because again, when we have an async method, you need the await keyword. So this means that this method again will continue executing before continuing with the loop. So until you hit OK, it will actually continue through the loop. So let's actually run this and let's see what we get. Let's give it a moment, bring it up on iOS. So again, we have the same thing. So, but now when we click the button, see, it brings up, it grabs the name for each name in names. So for each element in the array, it's going to grab it, which is already a string. So you don't need to do any kind of converting here to a string because it's already a string. That's the kind of parameters that display alert takes. So you have the name as a title, Xamarin.Forms, and then for the message, I love, and then we append, we put these 2 strings together. So I love Xamarin.Forms, same thing, and the button says OK. Then you hit OK. So and the loop is going to run 3 times because your array has 3 elements. So you hit OK. Then you get Xamarin iOS, right? Your second one. I love Xamarin iOS. And you get Xamarin Android for the last one, which you actually do. And if we run this on Android, we'll get the same thing except with the Android specific look. Hit OK, and that's it. So your for each went 3 times around and grabbed the elements here. So that's a very simple example of how to use a for each loop to iterate through an array. Now let's stop running it. And then we'll do one last array here. Let's delete this one here. And let's actually do an array of integers. So the same thing, integer, and then we open the brackets to say that it's an array. And we'll just call it integers here. And then again, create a new instance, int. And here we want, let's say 5 integers. Let's give it that. And here we're actually not going to set them manually as in here to the array, the values. We're not going to add them manually. We are going to use a different kind of loop here, which is called a for loop. And in Visual Studio, you can just type for, hit tab twice, and it's going to bring up the code snippet here. So let's just get that. Okay, so we have the array. So this is like for each. This also iterates, but this one iterates a certain number of times, and you can tell it like to stop at a certain point, and this is what max. So you start with a iteration variable that is just here by default defined as I, which starts at 0. So this will be the first loop, and then it's going to run certain loops until it hits a maximum value. And here you can just say whatever you want, 10, 3, whatever. But here we just want to iterate as far as the length of this integers array. So we're going to say here int integers dot length, and the length property here in the integers array gives you the length of this. So the length is 5 as we've declared it here. And now this is going to start at 0, so it's going to go like this. It's going to go 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I less than the length. So the length is 5. So when I is less than 5, it's going to stop. So when it hits 4, it's going to run that loop, and then it stops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to run the 5 loops for each one here. And the reason that this is like an offset, 5 and 4, is just because the iteration variables typically start here at 0, but that's fine. And then as you run through each loop, once each loop is finished, this I++ means it's going to increase this I integer variable. Plus means it increases it by 1. So it's going to run once, it starts at 0, and then it's going to increase it to 1. And then 2, 3, 4, and then the loop is going to end. So let's say, what do we want to do here? So we want to add them to the array. So let's say we'll grab integers, and again, and here, last time we explicitly said 0, 1, etc. for adding. Here we'll just pass I. And I the first time is going to be 0, the second time is going to be 1, and so on. So it's going to be what we need it to be every time. So integers I, and here we are going to assign add an integer, right? This is an array of integers, so we're going to add an integer, and I is already an integer. So we'll just add I, just like that. And we also want let's just also display alert again, just so we see. And for the title, let's say just nothing. Let's just leave the title empty. And then for the message, we'll just say integer. And then now this is taking a string, and then here we have an integer. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab I and say dot and grab the toString method that's inside of I. I contains a toString method that is it's a C# method that's going to convert the integer type to a string type. So if it's 0, for example, or 1, is going to convert it to the same 0 or 1, but now in string type. So we can actually put it here. So integer like this, and then let's just say add it to the array. Let's just keep it simple. Let's just say that, and then okay for the last one, close, and then we're good to go. Let's actually run this and let's see what we get. Just on iOS again, just to keep it simple for now. So once you click the button, it's going to start iterating through this loop. So the first time, okay, integer 0 added to the array, integer 0 added to your array here. We added 0 at this spot, okay? And then here in the display alert in the actual message, we say integer plus, and then this is where the 0 comes from. So you have your I, which is your integer, toString. So this is just string, but it just looks the same. It's just so it's type compatible here, that they're all strings. So click OK, and it's going to go again. Now integer 1 added to the array, again, integer 2 added, 3, 4, and then that's it. So now we've added all the integers here to our array, which contain 5, and we added the 5, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, which are the 5 integers. Now, what happens if you actually try to add another one? Let's say, so your array can only hold 5 elements. So what if you say I less than or equals? So this will cause the loop to run one extra time and try to add another element, a 6th element to this array, but it can only hold 5. So what's going to happen if we actually do this? Let's stop and run. Zero, 1, 2, 3, 4. So far we're good, but now it's going to try to add an element and to the array, but the array is full. It doesn't have any spots left, so we are going to get an error. And this is what we call an index out of range exception. And in another video, we'll actually get into how to handle exceptions. This index out of range exception is a type of exception. Exception is just a fancy word that we use for errors or runtime errors. So runtime just because they happen while the application is running at the time that it's running. That's why it's runtime exception. So we'll just stop it right here. But in another video, we'll take a look at handling exceptions and debugging. Here, so let's just close this. And let's just go back and that it works. So thank you for watching. I hope you liked it. This is, again, just an introduction to arrays and loops, and we'll keep building on this knowledge in subsequent videos. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, please leave them at the bottom. Also, please subscribe so you're the first to be notified. And I'll see you next time.